TX Factor is brought to you in association with Martin Lynch & Sons, the world's favourite ham store. Hello and welcome to TX Factor, the only UK TV show dedicated to amateur radio. In this extended episode, we're off to meet a man who's already known to many of us. He's an established amateur, an avid DXer and contester, but perhaps best known as the current editor of the UK's Practical Wireless magazine. We take a trip to Herne Bay in the southeast tip of England to the home of Icom UK to see how this family-run company has grown and adapted to radio communication trends over the past 40 years. And we end up in the UK's capital city at the new headquarters of the BBC's News and Current Affairs to meet two amateurs who are lucky enough to work at the BBC and still find time to enjoy their hobby. And there's a chance to win a FUNcube Dongle in our latest free-to-enter draw. But first, Bob Macready finds himself in an office with a difference.
Well, I'm delighted to be in the shack/stroke office of Don Field, the man we know as the editor of Practical Wireless. So we've come to find out a bit about that side of his life and about Don Field, the radio amateur. Don, thanks for inviting us.
My pleasure, Bob. Nice to see you.
So how long have you been editing PW now?
Well, I was just working that out, and I'm on my 15th issue, I think, or is it 17th issue of PW. I've been in the seat for almost 2 years, but I was shadowing Rob to start with, and then I was let loose on my own.
Because for you, your background, you've done some editing, but quite a step to move up to the role of editing a magazine that's as much of an institution as PW.
Absolutely, and it was quite a shock to the system, it has to be said. I'd been writing magazine articles for 30 years for various different magazines, and I'd edited the Chiltern DX Club Digest, which is quite a substantial magazine, but this was a different order altogether. And the biggest shock was not just the editing of the material, but all the other things that go with it, fitting the advertisements around the editorial material, making sure that competitors don't have their adverts next to each other, that sort of thing.
How was it when you did that first issue on your own, when you found yourself at the helm solo?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I had some support from Roger Hall, who's the advertising manager, and Steve Hunt, who does all the DTPing. And there was a lot of toing and froing because I was having to sound them out on all sorts of things. But it was really quite in at the deep end, I think you could say.
So a bit of a jargon alert there, DTPing.
Sorry, desktop
yes,
publishing, yes.
So desktop publishing, which explains really why in this day and age you can be the editor of PW and do that from home.
Work from home, yes. People still send things to me at the Bournemouth office thinking I'm working down there, but no, I'm freelance, I work from home, and it's all over the internet. In fact, I put the April issue, I should say, to bed while I was in Gambia on an expedition.
And it's a massive hobby, isn't it?
It's a massive hobby.
There are so many things that you could cover. How do you make a decision as to what to cover?
What to cover? Well, one of the things I like to do each month is to have a review, and that's fine. You know, we will try and source whatever is interesting and new and have a look at that, although finding somebody to review a product isn't always easy. But as well as that, what I try and do is look right across the hobby and say, well, what's interesting? What are people doing? Not just the things I'm interested in, but the whole gamut of the hobby. And say, well, we haven't covered that, maybe not in recent years. One of the things I want to cover, for example, over the next few months is remote operation. There's a lot of people doing that now. But actually finding people who are both doing it and able to write about it is a little bit of a challenge, so I'm working on that one right now, but that's exactly what I have to do.
If somebody's not that confident as a writer though, but they have the technical knowledge, presumably you can help them a bit.
Oh, I'm more than willing to help them, and I will say that, yes, that's right. And if need be, I will sit down with them and just take notes and write the thing up, although I'd rather they at least made a start on it. But yes, that is a challenge with some of the feature articles. You have people who maybe don't write well, and then that's my job to put it right.
There's probably a lot of people watching this at the moment who feel that they would like to have a go, but perhaps not quite confident enough, thinking, well, what if I send it in and they reject it, or, you know, make a bit of a fool of myself writing this? But your encouragement, I guess, would be, no, go on, give it a go.
My encouragement would be give it a go. I get quite a lot of material coming in which I would say is suitable for a club newsletter, because that's what people are used to writing, but maybe not for Practical Wireless. But that's not a problem, because we can have some interaction and I can say, well, yeah, maybe we can just fill out this little bit a bit more, or a little bit more explanation here. It gets more difficult if we have constructional articles, and I'd like more constructional articles, so I'd appeal to your viewers if they've got anything sitting there. But a lot of people, of course, build from their junk box and it's not repeatable, or they tweak things until it works, but again, it may not be repeatable. So ideally we want something where it's using components that you can buy from a Maplins or wherever, that has been tried, maybe built by several members of a club, so we know it works.
I was wondering if that actually is an issue these days for you, because the name of the magazine is Practical Wireless, and there's always been that emphasis on building.
Absolutely.
And in the early days, the Practical Wireless blueprints and, and all of that. These days, a lot of people tend not to build much in terms of the bigger parts of their kit. It's more antennas, maybe ATUs, but building a whole rig is not something that many people embark on.
Not many would do. Tony Naylor, who is one of our regular contributors, runs a company as well, and he sources PCBs and components for most of the projects that he builds, and he has worked through the various elements of a transceiver over time, the amplifier, the IF strips and so on. But you're absolutely right, most people will just want to build a little piece of test equipment or something like that. And I actually interpret the practical in the title rather more broadly than just building things. I think actually operating is a very practical activity as well. And I want to encompass the whole of the hobby, not just building, because we are the only independent magazine out there, the only one on the bookshelves that cover amateur radio.
And like it or not, computers are a massive part of amateur radio.
Huge part,
and
yes.
A big part of the practical part of amateur radio can be just getting your head around that, getting programs to work, getting them to work with your radio, do the things that you want them to do.
It's interesting you should say that, Bob. You can see my station here. I've got my FT5000 sitting above it is a screen which is showing at the moment my logging program, but that's connected to the cluster. We're seeing the spots coming up on the screen here. It picks up the frequency off the radio. The whole thing is fairly integrated, and yes, if you're setting up for a contest or something, you want it to do send the CW for you, a lot of the standard messages, if not the one-off exchanges. You can spend a lot more time setting up the computer side of it than you can the radio side of it.
So tell us about Don Field, the radio amateur then. What's your area of interest, Don?
Well, I started back in the 60s listening to the pirate broadcast stations, and then I inherited a broadcast receiver from my grandparents which had the trawler band on as well. A lot of people went that way in the 60s. They suddenly discovered amateurs on amplitude modulation on 160 and 80 meters, and I dived in there, wanted to talk to these people, and got my license. But over the years my interest has really been in the competitive side of the hobby, so that's DXing and contesting.
And that's taken you to some very interesting places.
It certainly has, yes.
Tell us about some of the expeditions you've done.
Well, I have operated, as you say, from a lot of different places with a lot of different groups, either contest-wise or DX-wise. So I've been, for example, on a number of trips to West Africa with the so-called Voodoo Contest Group, which is a bunch of Americans and Brits who love to go there, enjoy the local scene, and set up field day style. Every couple of years we moved our equipment on to another country and a whole new set of challenges. We poke fun at each other, our different backgrounds. We tease the Americans, they tease us, and we have a great time operating the contests. But I've also been with what we've called the 5-star DX group. That was a bit of a joke in the title as well, because often our locations are anything but 5-star. But we've been to a number of islands in the Indian Ocean, to Rodrigues, to St Brandon and so on, and put on some very big expeditions. The last one we did a few years ago was to Christmas Island in the Pacific, and we were the first expedition, the only one so far, to make over 200,000 contacts.
What about operating from home?
From home, I like to do some contesting, I like to do some DXing. I do a little bit of rag chewing, but I never seem to have time for that when I'm busy editing PW. It's difficult to be competitive from home these days with so many big contest stations and so on. I can chase DX, I've got quite a good setup here, but in a contest it's tough.
Tell us about the discipline needed to work from home, because I imagine we've got two desks here. We've got a desk here, this is PW,
yes.
I'm sitting at PW.
You are.
And over there is DXing and contesting and
yes.
having fun. How tempting is it to switch desks halfway through the day?
It can be very tempting, especially if you see something pop up on the internet saying there's an interesting station on, then I'll rush over here and try and make contact with it. But usually that doesn't take too long, or hopefully it doesn't, because if it's during the day, everybody else is at work.
So take us through the station then. What have you got here, Don?
Well, what we've got here, you've already seen the FT5000 is my base station transceiver. I've been a Yaesu user for a number of years now, and I like it very much. What you've got sitting on top of that is a micro keyer, which has got a built-in key. It's got built-in sound cards to handle the data modes, and it also picks up the frequency information from the radio. So that's the integration we were talking about a little while ago. I've got a linear amplifier sitting under the desk here. No reason for it to take up desk space, because again it's got a USB connection to the computer and I can control it all from the computer. I have an Elecraft line over here. That's mainly an expedition setup. These are lightweight, very good performance, and has been the rig of choice on a couple of recent expeditions I've been to, the Austral Islands last year and the Gambia earlier this year. And then I've got sitting here a Kenwood TS590G, which is on loan from Kenwood at the moment, for me to review for Practical Wireless. I could have asked anybody to review it, but I wanted to have a play with it myself.
I don't blame you, Don. I see you've got the CW key on the desk there. Are you a keen CW operator, Don?
Yes, I think probably about 90% of my operating is on CW. I do enjoy that.
How did you get so into CW? Because it is one of those things that people either love it, or in the days when you had to take the exam, you did it, and then a lot of people just forgot it. I have to say I'm one of those, I hate to admit. So why do you love it
Yes,
so much?
I never went for the Class B licence. I went straight for a Class A licence. I learned CW right from the start. And that was because I wanted to operate on the HF bands. I'd been listening on 160, 80 metres. And then I started with a Kodar AT5 transmitter. That was a 10 watt radio for 160 and 80 metres. And I quickly found that on CW I could work all over Europe, whereas with 10 watts of amplitude modulation it was tough. So that's what got me interested in CW. And then I started doing a few contests, and again it was easier on CW than on AM with low power. And that was fine. And then it was a 1980 or 81, I did a 48-hour CW contest with a straight key, you know, one of those up and down keys. It was an old RAF one. And my wrist ached for about a week afterwards, and I said, it's time to learn how to use an iambic key, one of the side swipe things.
Do you still get repetitive CW syndrome from the side swipe?
Really,
it's not so bad.
Nowhere near as bad. And of course, if you do a 48-hour contest these days, a lot of the exchanges can be programmed and you just hit function keys on the computer anyway.
And again, we come into a lot of the practical aspects of the hobby with this, don't we? And the things that people have done with the cheap TV dongles and getting them to work on SDR. So there's a lot you could do there, which kind of brings us back to where we started our conversation with PW, because it's a very wide hobby with so many different interests within it. The technology is moving forward very fast, and you've taken the reins of the magazine and are now having to decide which direction you're going to take that in reflecting all of this. How do you see the future of the magazine?
Yes, I see the magazine in this day and age of the internet as being a pointer to a large extent, because there's so much material available out there, and people say, why do you need magazines anymore? Well, to me, what we can do is actually point people in the direction and say, well, here's an introduction to an aspect of the hobby that you might not have been playing with, whether it be satellites, whether it be microwave or whatever. Have you thought about doing that? You do HF, or you do VHF FM, for example, but there's something else that you might like to try. And if you want to try it, here's an introduction, but then here are the resources that you can turn to if you want to dig deeper, because we can't go into great detail on everything, but what we can do is actually give you an idea of what's going on.
And being a bit of a showcase for new products as well, which has always been an important role of the magazine, hasn't it?
Interestingly enough, at Newark at the National Ham Fest the other year, we ran a little survey as to what people enjoyed in the magazine. And of course they enjoyed the constructional articles, and they enjoyed stuff about computers in the shack, as you'd expect. But one of the things that came out was they enjoyed the advertisements, because people do want to know what's new out there. So yes, the showcase for new products, as you say. And particularly at the moment, new products are SDR related or computer related in one way or another.
For every radio amateur, I guess then, Don, the dream is to have the best antennas you can have. And for most of us, having a tower is a dream, but it's one that you've managed to realise.
It's one I managed to realise. I don't know whether I'd managed to do it these days, but 30 years ago I did manage to get planning permission for a tower, yes. And there it is in all its glory.
So what have we got here?
What we've got is a 60-foot Versa tower, and on top of it is a 3-element step IR.
Ah, the step IR. Right, tell us about the step IR, Don.
Yes, it's a 5-band antenna. In fact, it could be more if we ever got any more bands, because what it is some fiberglass tubing with a metal tape that runs in and out, operated by stepper motors, hence the name, according to which band you're on. So it becomes a half-wave dipole with a reflector and a director.
Right.
And in fact, for 20, 15, 10 meters, it's got multiple settings according to where in the band you are. So it really is optimized, not just for the band, but for exactly where you are in the band.
So what would you do if we were given a new band? Then you have to work out what the dimensions would be.
Yes, that's right. And then you would program them into the controller.
Ah, clever stuff.
It's
so
very
you
clever,
can operate
yes.
anywhere on HF then, from where to where?
Anywhere basically from 14 megs through to 30 megs. With that, and it also will operate on 6 and 4 meters. It winds the driven element right in on those bands, and we have some passive elements as well, which are just attached to the boom.
What else have we got hanging off the tower then? Because there's a few wires coming off in different directions.
Well, what I've got here is a setup that covers everything from 160 meters through to 4 meters. So we've got a top band inverted L hanging on there. We've got an inverted V dipole for 80 meters. We've got a sloping dipole for 30 meters. And above the step IR is the driven element of a 40-meter Yagi. I can't put up the full Yagi, but I can put up a dipole. So that's about 2/3 of full size with inductive and capacitive loading. And in the summer, I put up a big Yagi for 6 meters. So I take down the 40-meter dipole and put up the big 6-meter Yagi.
There's an interesting family story though that goes with this setup, because looking at your garden here, I'd have to say you've got a lovely patio in front of the house. That'd be a nice spot for a conservatory, Don.
Not allowed to do that.
Why is that?
Because I want to be able to tilt the tower over and work on the antennas.
I had to say that because it was your daughter-in-law.
My daughter-in-law, yes, who keeps telling me that we could build a nice conservatory on the back of the house.
No conservatory,
no
because you've got to be able to get the antenna down so that
That's
you can
right.
look at it.
Yes.
You have to get these things in the
Got
correct
to get
order.
the priorities right,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Still to come on TX Factor, Bob recalls the good old days of the IC22A and discovers there's more to reading the BBC shipping forecast than meets the eye. The folks at Martin Lynch & Sons are now fully established in their brand new home in Staines near London's Heathrow Airport. The new superstore is just a few minutes walk from the Staines Main Line Railway and only 5 minutes drive from junction 13 off the M25. It's the largest dedicated ham radio showroom in Europe, so why not pop in and see the huge array of new and used equipment. Even though it's 4 times the size of the old Chertsey store, complete with a massive workshop facility, you'll still be greeted by the same old friendly faces. Martin guarantees you'll love the new premises. See our website for full details.
I'm very privileged to be here at Icom UK and meeting Dave Stockley, G4 ELP, the founder of the company, because a very important year last year for Icom, 50th anniversary of Icom itself and the 40th anniversary of Icom UK. So, Dave, been an interesting 40 years, I guess.
Yes, it certainly has, yes.
How did the business start for you? How did you get into the business of selling amateur radio gear?
Well, I was a radio amateur, and myself and another ham, we decided to see if we can get direct import from Icom, because we both had Icom radios, and that's how it started. And
so what year was this?
That was 1974, in around about March.
So at that time, there wasn't much ready-made gear that you could buy. Amateurs were used to making their own or buying ex-War Department stuff.
Very, very little around. In fact, there was dear old Bill Lowe, who's long gone now. He was one of the first ones, and then SMC, and they were both fighting over Yaesu at the time.
But when you decided to start this business as a radio ham, thinking, right, I can see there's a potential market here, you were actually in the fire service at the time.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was a fireman, but I'd had quite a bad accident and broken my femur, and I was expected to carry on for quite a bit, but it was getting harder and harder. So in the end, we decided to start the business up. But I carried on working in the fire service at Whitstable until we got it to a stage where I could take a wage.
Now, you must have thought it was right place, right time. So in the history of amateur radio, we're at a point where this manufactured gear is beginning to come in from Japan, and there's a hunger for it here in the UK. But you had a real faith in this, didn't you? Because you put everything into this business.
Yes, in fact, the compensation I received from my broken leg was a total of £7,000. I put all of that in, plus put my house on the line. So we actually started with £7,000 each, and it turned out to be not a bad deal.
And where was the business based then?
At the time, it was still at the fire station in Whitstable, but after a few months I moved up at the top of the hill, and of course, because I was a radio ham, and we set it up in one of the rooms in the house.
So you literally started this business out of a spare room in your house?
Yes, yes.
So how did it go from the beginning? Because you've put everything in it, you've put your house on the line. What were you hoping to do in that first year?
Well, our first forecast, because the Japanese love figures and forecasts, we forecast £80,000 turnover, which was okay in those times, but we actually managed 130,000.
Wow.
And we did very well, and of course I didn't actually take very much in the way of a wage, because we wanted to get the thing cracking.
Thanet Electronics was the name of the company then, and it soon became a pretty familiar name through the ads in Shortwave magazine, and the other radio journals. So you pretty quickly outgrew that back room.
Yes, there was only the two of us to start with, but we couldn't really cope. So we bought an old bakery in Beltinge, and tidied it up and got the offices going, and that was fine until we outgrew that. We ended up with about 23 people, and we were falling over each other.
So 23 people in that tiny bakery.
Yeah.
Was it just amateur radio still then, or had you begun to branch out?
Just started to branch out into marine radio first, and the first radio was the M20, which was a white coloured one and completely waterproof. So that worked out very well.
What was the big turning point in amateur radio? Because I remember the first rig, and I couldn't even afford one of these. One of my friends had an IC22A, and those first ones, they were crystal controlled, weren't they? And I don't think they came with 22 crystals in when you bought them.
No, they didn't. They actually came with about 4, and I spent many, many evenings putting in crystals, and you have to line them all up, and it was hard work. And of course, we had probably only sold about 10 radios a day then, but I still had to do 10 radios.
Yeah, and people would say, I want the LO repeater was big then,
Yeah.
wasn't it? So they want.
We got all the crystals, and it had, yes, it was hard work, but it was just very enjoyable at the time.
So when it moved on to synthesised rigs, I suppose that was a big jump forward.
Yes, the first one was the 225, which was synthesised, 25 kc spacing, and it had all the channels. It reduced the workload, there's no doubt about it.
So how long did it take before you then outgrew the refurbished bakery?
I suppose about 10 years, and we ended up buying a factory unit down in C Street in Herne Bay.
And by this point, the marine had become very important to you,
Yes.
and business radio was beginning.
And we'd
to grow.
also started PMR radio at the time, so it was all. It was we had to work with the Home Office with type approvals, and that was hard work too.
One of the important things about Icom UK is still to this day a family business. So, who in the family is working in the business now?
Yes, I have two sons, Robert and Andrew, and Rob, he prefers to be called Bob. He's the RMD now, and Andrew is also a director. So we've got those two as directors, and they help run the business very well indeed.
So, what sort of age were they when they came into the business?
Well, they all started in packing. We all started from the bottom. I used to do packing, and that's where they started, and they worked through the way through the different jobs.
At least they were excused the crystalling up the IC22As.
Yes,
so
they didn't have that.
they were able to miss out that bit.
Yeah.
It must be quite hard, I suppose, for you now to be standing back a little from the business and letting them get on with it.
Yes, but things move on, and the youngsters come along and they've got a slightly different attitude, and it's good. It's a family business, and we're not actually working for someone, we're working for ourselves.
And the business really has moved on, hasn't it? Because you then outgrew that factory premises to come 5 years ago to where we are now.
Yes, a big move here, but it is lovely. Most of it was designed by Bob, my son, and he did a very good job. To be honest, I would have been much more careful with our money.
So do you ever find yourself wanting to say to the guys, I mean, do you have any input into the business now, or do you just let them get on with it?
I let them get on with it. I have a little bit of input every now and then, but I let them get on with it. But I'm a listening ear. If anybody wants to talk to me, then they can do.
So that's the first 40 years of Icom UK. How do you see the next 40 years playing out?
I can see that we're going to move more and more towards digital techniques. I don't really know. It's difficult to see how the youngsters coming along are getting a grasp of things, because I started with valves and worked my way through.
What you really need is people who have that kind of love that comes with the radio amateur that you had when you were a youngster, pulling things to bits and putting them back together and modding them. And
yeah, I think the amateur radio fraternity is a very good background for an awful lot of different electronic fields. It's a good grounding, and generally they have their heart in it.
So what's your favourite thing in amateur radio at the moment?
Well, I spend a bit of time on 160 metres, but 10 metres, there's quite a lot going on. 10, as it's open just at the moment. 40 metres, it's quite a bit, but that's about it. I used to be mad on repeaters, but I'm not so much now.
Yeah. And over the years, has it been nice to be able to, as a radio amateur, review the kit that you've had from Icom when there's something new coming onto the market, that you're able to look at it with a radio amateur's eyes and see how this is going to play?
Yeah, I do. There's one big thing I'm always complaining about. As I'm getting older, my eyes are getting worse, the knobs are getting smaller and the buttons are small, and I can't read the writing. That's my big complaint at the moment, but all the radios are the same. They're just getting that way.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for telling us about the history of Icom UK so far, and here's to the next 40 years, Dave.
Thank you very much.
It's a very big place, this, and an awful lot of stock, as we can see all around us here. And that essentially is the name of the game for you guys, because you've got to be thinking ahead in all the different areas, marine, amateur, business radio, aviation, the stuff that people are going to want. How do you predict what to get in stock?
Probably the most difficult area to keep a handle on is land mobile, because we have large tender contracts that come along, and quite often we'll have quoted for something, and then 6 months later the customer will confirm the order, but then of course they want delivery in a few weeks' time. If we haven't got the stuff here, then it takes us 12 weeks minimum to get it built. But yeah, we've got a lot of stuff in here, and our motto has always been, if you haven't got it, you can't sell it.
It's very interesting as to why you have an Icom UK business, because you could think, well, you could just import straight from Japan, people could get the stuff and just use it themselves. But the point is that you actually really tailor make your equipment, or adjust it or modify according to the requirements of the market here. So you have that very direct connection with your customers in the UK.
That's right. We try and tailor make the package that the customer receives ultimately what they want. So whether that's a piece of amateur radio equipment, a mobile or a hand portable, marine radio, land mobile or aviation, we carry out modifications or market preparation on most of the boxes we sell. And actually we're very different to a lot of other Icom businesses in the way that we put our product onto the market.
So you do produce some of your own accessories to equipment, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. We've just done a job recently for a search and rescue organisation where they wanted a black box add-on to one of our marine radios, but ultimately they wanted to use it with one of our compatriots' pieces of navigational equipment using a LCD touchscreen flat screen monitor. So we developed all of that in-house.
And does that mean it's fairly easy for the customer to talk to you guys here?
We'd like to think so. We never hide behind our telephone number or anything. We don't have a receptionist as such. If the phone rings, we pick it up. Anybody, if it's ringing, you answer it. And we're all about customer service.
Where do you think the future is going for your business? Because it's grown and grown and grown. There are a lot of other technologies around now, internet technology. Does RF radio communication still have a big future?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look at us talking now. You're always going to need to talk. Whether you're a forklift driver in a warehouse, whether you're two guys on a construction site, somebody in a crane. Two-way radio, analogue, has always going to have a future. Of course, digital radio is a big thing for us. But we're using things like internet IP radio as a add-on to our business. So we can talk to people across the net in a different country, if you like, or in a different part of the UK on a normal low-power hand portable radio using an IP connection.
And is there a connection as well between amateur radio and your wider business, in the sense that we need more young people interested in technical things so that we produce more apprentices for businesses like yours in the future? Exactly.
I mean, all our clever guys in the lab are all radio amateurs. What we need, young people getting into the hobby, understanding how the equipment works, how it's put together, so we can repair it, so we can develop it, so we can tweak it and enhance it for future business.
Coming up after the break, your chance to win a FUNcube Dongle Pro, courtesy of its inventor, Howard Long. And we meet our previous winner and his Inov Antennas 2-metre quad. And gosh, is that the time? We go behind the scenes at the BBC to see how two amateurs help keep the BBC's radio programmes on the air. You'll probably recognise this, it's the famous TX Factor Shack Mug. Well, we now have plenty in stock for that ideal birthday or Father's Day gift. The Shack Mug is perfect for holding tea, coffee or beer while you search for that elusive DX. And if you'd like to own one and have it shipped to you, then visit the TX Factor website and click on Store. And if you're brave enough to send us a photo of you and your new mug in your shack or at some other amazing venue, we'll enter you into a draw for a special TX Factor prize. In the last episode of TX Factor, Bob McCready reviewed the Inov Antennas 3-element quad-style Yagi for 2 metres, and we gave you a chance to win one in our free-to-enter draw. From the many hundreds of entries we received, the lucky one pulled from the hat was from Wim Woutier, Oscar November 5 Whiskey Whiskey, who lives in Belgium. Congratulations to him, and good luck to you if you decide to have a go at winning a FUNcube Dongle Pro, kindly donated by its inventor, Howard Long. Simply visit our webpage at txfactor.co.uk, and there you'll be able to navigate to the competition page where you'll find terms and conditions and a button which will enter you into the draw. News of the lucky winner will be published on the website and appear in a future edition.
On TX Factor, we pride ourselves on being the only UK TV show dedicated to amateur radio. So today, we've come to the home of professional radio and TV for the UK. Behind us is New Broadcasting House. We're right next door to the incredibly beautiful Art Deco building that is Broadcasting House, built in 1932, the first purpose-built broadcasting centre in the world. So today, we've come to meet some radio amateurs who work here.
BBC News at midday. A mother from East London who abused, tortured and killed...
Later we'll join Radio 4 newsreader Jim Lee, but our host for the day is studio manager Jonathan Kempster.
Hi Bob,
Jonathan, nice to see you.
Hi, nice to meet you. A radio amateur who works professionally in radio. What's your call sign?
It's M5AEO.
So here we are, New Broadcasting House. What's in here?
Well, everything is in here now. We've conglomerated our operations at Bush House, so the World Service are here, both World Service English and the language services. TV News from Television Centre is now here, all the Radio 4 news and current affairs programmes, and of course TV News.
And there's a TV studio across here where the One Show comes from, which UK viewers will be very familiar with, and they're just setting up out on the piazza here for a piece they'll probably be doing outside later on. So it's a really busy broadcasting hub, this. Can we come in and have a look?
Please be my guest.
Jonathan, in your day job, what's your title?
I'm a studio manager working in radio news.
And has being a radio amateur helped you in your career?
I think it has. I mean, I've been a radio listener, shortwave listener, since the age of 8. I even used to broadcast to my mother in her kitchen from my bedroom.
So did I.
So it felt a natural step to come into radio, and I was fortunate enough to join the BBC World Service 30 years ago now. Had fantastic training at the BBC's Engineering Training College in Wood Norton, and I've been here ever since.
So here we are in a state-of-the-art 21st century BBC studio. What kind of kit have we got in here?
Well, this is one of our workshop studios. We've got quite a lot of these dotted around the building here at UBH. It allows reporters or studio managers like myself to come in and mix packages. You can just record a straight voice piece using the AKG condenser mic that we have here. Or you can interview up to 3 guests in here as well. We have a digital recording and editing system made by a German company called VCS. And we have the electronic news production system, which was pioneered by Associated Press, and that's for producing scripts, working out timings of programmes, etc.
Well, I think there you've sort of highlighted the biggest difference between how it was when you started 30 years ago and now, because now you're completely surrounded by computer screens. So it's all digital technology. So I suppose that's the biggest change.
That's true. Now I have an ambiguous relationship with computers because I'm of an age where we didn't have them at school. When I started working at the BBC, everything was recorded on magnetic open reel tape. So certain craft skills like tape editing have sadly now gone. But having said that, I'm now quite happy with the computer technology. The editing system we have allows you to make and remake edits as many times as you like. It's called non-destructive editing. On tape, you were limited in how far you could take that.
I always found that I threw the bit of tape in the bin that I actually wanted to keep and then spent a lot of time trying to find the right bit of tape.
Exactly, but those days are now gone, and I think there are great advantages in the digital world. For example, a reporter anywhere in the world, so long as they can get a cell phone signal, they can now do live two-way interviews into the studio in full high audio quality, and that's something that we couldn't have done 15 years ago.
We hear a lot about needing more young people with technical skills in various jobs. Do you think that being a radio amateur or being a young person interested in amateur radio is a good route into a job like this?
I think so, yes, because amateur radio itself has seen many technological changes over the years. And the young people we're getting in now tend to be very tech savvy. You know, they're used to using their iPads and they're writing their own music on their laptop and that sort of thing. So I think for someone interested in radio, there's never been a better time to come into broadcasting.
When you look at the old broadcasting house from Regent Street and you look up at that marvellous building, on the top of it is that iconic white transmitter tower, which when I was young I thought that's where the programmes actually came from. So we've come up to the balcony just below that, and we're going to use it as an RF takeoff spot because Jonathan has got the prize that he won in the last episode of TX Factor, the little VX3.
Indeed, and it's beautiful. It just fits nicely in my pocket.
In the pocket. So what we're going to do is try and find out if from this very historic site we might be able to get a QSO using a call sign that sadly doesn't get used that much these days.
Indeed, G8 BBC is the club station, the aerial radio group. Unfortunately, the London branch is now in somewhat of a disarray. A lot of members left. We lost our permanent shack, which was over at TV Centre. TV Centre was sold off and closed last year. So in the new broadcasting house, we're told at the moment there isn't any floor space for us. So G8 BBC only ever now comes on the air as G8 BBC Portable, and this is going to be G8 BBC Portable today.
And just before we try it out, we're very close to the scene of an historic amateur radio contact.
Indeed.
Because just over here, this is the Langham Hotel now, but it used to be a BBC building, and that's where the radio club was.
Indeed, back in the 1980s, the aerial radio group had a shack in the Langham, which was a BBC-owned building, and that's where Laurie Margolis, G3UML, famously contacted the Falkland Islands and notified the British government that an invasion had started.
So he was actually the first person to tell the British government thanks to that radio contact.
Indeed, he got through to a Falkland Islands VP8 station, who rather cryptically said to Laurie, "We have some visitors today."
Oh.
And it then became apparent that the Argentine army had invaded the Falkland Islands. And Laurie rang the Foreign Office and said, "This has happened." And they said, "Well, tell us everything you know."
And that contact made from the BBC Radio Club at the Langham, and the rig that he used to make that contact, I believe, is at the National Radio Centre now at Bletchley Park.
Indeed it is. It's an old Yaesu FT200 in full working order and very nice condition, and it's on display from time to time at the National Radio Centre at Bletchley.
So we're following in illustrious footsteps today in trying to have a QSO.
Indeed. I'm not quite sure how far I'm going to get, but we'll give it a try.
We might be able to get into one of the local repeaters from here. What do you think's most likely?
I think we're shielded to the north, but that's east, so let's try GB3EL.
Give it a go.
CQ, this is G8 BBC Portable, Golf 8, Bravo, Bravo, Charlie Portable, listening through for any calls. CQ, G8 BBC Portable, Golf 8, Bravo, Bravo, Charlie Portable, listening for any calls.
It's always the way, isn't it? When you want to get a reply through a repeater, you don't get one. Never mind, we've got other things to see anyway. But at least we did give G8 BBC an airing. Jonathan, while you were doing that, I was looking across here at this, well, what is it exactly?
It looks like a giant flower vase, doesn't it? It's actually a memorial to fallen journalists, which was put in when the building was put up 2 years ago. And at night it lights up beautifully, and I think it's a very fitting tribute.
Fantastic.
Police have arrested 56 people in a week-long operation to crack down on computer and internet crime. They include a 23-year-old man accused of being behind an alleged cyber attack on the US Defense Department. The head of the United Nations Cultural Organization, UNESCO, has condemned the destruction of the ancient Assyrian city of Numrud in Iraq by Islamic State fighters. Iraqi officials say bulldozers have been flattening walls and statues that are more than 3,000 years old. This is BBC Radio 4. Now, it's early morning in the Archers.
This is really exciting because here we are in a BBC Radio 4 continuity studio with Jim Lee, G4AEH. And Jim, if I could pinch a line from a Practical Wireless from a few years ago, you're the amateur who runs megawatts on all bands.
Ah, yes, that was Rob Mannion, wasn't it? The editor of Practical Wireless put that in. Yes, he wanted me to write an article for him about my experiences here at Radio 4. And yes, I suppose if you tot up all the power of every transmitter that I go out on, it'll be well into the megawatts, I should think, because I work on the World Service as well, and of course shortwave transmitters around the world. I must be using up a few watts.
So which came first for you, Jim, amateur radio or professional radio?
Amateur radio. I was about 15 in the 60s. I know I don't look old enough, but in the 60s I used to listen to the radio pirates, you know, on the North Sea and all the rest of it, and I was so interested in them that I was occupying the family transistor, Decca transistor radio. So my mum came back from a church jumble sale one day and said, I bought you a radio, your own radio, and it was a big wooden cabinet job, fantastic. 5 shillings, 25 pence. I had to go. She didn't carry it back. I had to go to the church and bring it down. And of course, this had shortwave on it. So when I couldn't be bothered listening to Radio Caroline or whatever, I'd have a listen around the shortwaves. Fantastic noises, the sounds that came out of this thing were brilliant. And then one day I heard this chap talking, like normally, and he said he was waving to a woman across the road. And I thought, what? This isn't broadcast radio, this isn't a radio station. And of course it turned out to be 40 metres AM. And from that minute I was hooked. And I wanted to be one of these people. So it took a few years, but yeah, so that came first. And of course, with the interest in the pirates and the listening to shortwave broadcast stations, and the fact that people like Tony Blackburn on the Pirates made it sound such fun, I thought, I want to do this. So that's why I had the amateur radio interest, but also yearning to work in broadcast radio.
Now, you don't have to answer this, Jim, in case it incriminates you, but and I'm thinking that your experiences, how you got interested in amateur radio and broadcasting, very similar to mine. So was there ever a little radio station broadcasting in the Lee home?
Well, it was a long time ago, wasn't it? Yes. Although it wasn't in my household, it was in a mate's household, but I had the recording equipment, so I used to record the tapes in my shack, and we broadcast them from another part of town on 6.240, I remember. Yes, I mean, I just couldn't resist it, and I was a bit naughty at one point because I did have the recording equipment, you know, the decks and the mixer in my shack when the post office man, as it was in those days, turned up to inspect my station. And he was very good. He was very kind. He did have a problem he wanted to talk to me about, but he kind of ignored the mixing desk side of it. And so I got off with that, but I did get a rap across the knuckles for something else. But I was young. I was 17 or something.
Did you ever think, Jim, that it would lead one day to you sitting in this room in control, one-man control of the entire Radio 4 network in the UK?
Never in a million years. No, I would have been happy just to have been a disc jockey on a radio station, playing records and messing around with tapes and jingles, and I just wanted to operate that gear. But also what fascinated me was the fact that my voice, and even on amateur radio, my voice was going into this box, going up a wire, and possibly going all over the world. To me, it was magic. That's magic, and there is still a magic in the whole radio thing. But to think I'd be operating, looking at, I mean, I am in charge. When you were here earlier today watching me on Radio 4, I was in charge of Radio 4. Never mind the controller. What happened on air today was down to me, and if somebody says, can we have some extra time for our programme? No, I can either say no or, yeah, all right then. It's down to me. Unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable.
So it seems to me, watching you work, Jim, that the job is very much about timing. All the time you're working out your timings, and you can't crash those pips, can you?
No. I mean, being a Radio 4 announcer is not about announcing the Archers or reading the shipping forecast. What it is making sure all the pre-recorded and live programmes and the trails that mix into an hour, they all finish in time for that Greenwich time signal, which isn't on tape, it's not a recording, it happens whether you want it to or not. It happens at 5 seconds to the hour, and I've got to be ready for that, which is why, I mean, it doesn't look much. It's a bit of a mess, but that is my day to day on Radio 4. That tells me where I need to be at any particular point. I know it just looks like a mess and it's just a number of figures, but I know exactly where I should be at any particular time. And if I need to talk for 25 seconds to fill a shortfall, then I talk for 25 seconds, not 26, because that means I'm a second closer to crushing those pips.
So when you finished talking to the nation from here in your Radio 4 continuity studio, you go home and you get on the amateur bands. That's a bit of a busman's holiday, isn't it?
Yeah, when I go, I don't live in London, I live in the Midlands, I live in Nuneaton in Warwickshire, which is 100 miles from here. I just come to London to work, and if I'm not working, I want to get home, for all sorts of reasons, but one of them is for the ham radio, yeah. I mean, I've got some nice equipment these days. It wasn't always the case. You know, when I started off, a mate of mine lent me a Kodar AT5. That's how I got on, and my dad gave me 19 quid to buy an Ediston S640.
I don't know if I should ask this, but this seems an opportunity that I'm never going to have again. I'm sat here in this Radio 4 continuity suite. Now, I know I can't do it on air, but can I have a go at the shipping forecast, Jim?
If you think you're man enough, Bob.
I've always wondered if I could. It sounds like a difficult one, but we'll give it a go. Let's have a look at the script.
There's the script. Now you'll notice there's not much in the way of punctuation.
There isn't.
Okay, here's the pips. Bip, 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 beep.
And now the shipping forecast issued by the Met Office on behalf of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency at 11:30 on Friday the 6th of March 2015. There are warnings of gales in Viking North. You see, I've gone already.
Yeah, you see, it's Viking North Utsira, not Viking North Utsira. See, normally you'd have a comma but in the shipping forecast they don't bother putting them in.
And now a gale warning. Gale, your husband knows all about us.
Well, I can assure you that, to the best of my knowledge, Bob doesn't know anybody called Gale. He does know a Dawn, though. Well, that's it for another edition of TX Factor. We hope you've enjoyed our review of radio amateurs who make a difference in the world of broadcast radio. Don't forget you can check our website, txfactor.co.uk, to find out more about our programmes and, of course, how to enter our next free-to-enter draw. And good luck for that. Well, it's getting late now. Time to get back on the radio. TX Factor is brought to you in association with Martin Lynch & Sons, the world's favourite ham store.